Good morning, everybody. We're going to give you just a moment or two to get settled in, and then we will turn it over for our fantastic presentation this morning. Just some technical stuff while you're all getting connected here. During the presentations, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A button right at the bottom of your screen there. If you have any comments, feel free to pop them in the chat. We will also be opening up at the very end of our presentation, if you're interested in asking your question live, you can use the raise hand feature and we will open up your microphone so you can talk and say hello and ask your question to our presenter directly. So with no further ado, it is now 9:30. So I am going to turn it over to Melissa. Oh, and I always forget to do this. Hi, everybody. I'm Amy from the Otsego County Conservation Association. So now I'm going to turn it over to Melissa and we'll get started with today's presentation.
Hey, good morning and welcome to our 6th Watershed Wednesday of 2021. Watershed Wednesdays are hosted in part by the Otsego County Conservation Association and by the Upper Susquehanna Coalition. They occur every Wednesday from August to October at 9:30 a.m. These webinars are posted on USC's webpage and YouTube page and can also be found on our Facebook page. My name is Melissa Urich and I work with the Upper Susquehanna Coalition's wetland team. And it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Michelle Herman. Michelle graduated in May 2021 from SUNY ESF with a master's in conservation biology. She's currently a biological technician for the Wetland Trust. Among other duties, she oversees the day-to-day operations of the Wetland Trust Eastern Hellbender rearing facility and the field monitoring of released and wild hellbenders in the watershed, in addition to general wildlife monitoring on TWT preserves. Take it away, Michelle.
Morning. And yeah, I'm going to kind of take you through what I think should be a fairly fun, freewheeling presentation about just some of the more elusive and interesting wildlife in the watershed. And with that, I am going to give a blazing fast overview and update on one initiative on the Eastern Hellbender. There is a recovery initiative that I've been a part of for the past 2 years. And we have some exciting updates for this year. And unfortunately, I don't really have time to get into the context and the whole history of this project. If you'd like to know more, you can always contact me afterwards. But just very briefly, as an amphibian, the Eastern Hellbender is part of this global extinction crisis, unfortunately, where we are seeing this large-scale loss of species. They're disappearing at an incredible rate. And the Hellbender, unfortunately, is also experiencing anywhere from 40 to 100% population declines starting around the 1970s, where we're seeing older populations with very low recruitment, meaning that there's fewer young animals making it to maturity. And the map is showing you the range of the Eastern subspecies, which is the subspecies we are working with in this watershed. And then there's also an Ozark subspecies, but you'll notice that here in central New York, we're in that upper eastern prong. So we are at the northern extent of their range. And just to kind of emphasize why we're doing this recovery initiative, not just in this watershed, but throughout their range, you can see in pretty much every state they occur in, they have some sort of conservation status reflecting the fact that populations are declining. And that brings us to this recovery initiative that we started. It has origins back to 2014 when a clutch of eggs was discovered in the watershed. And from there, we developed this program where we work with our partners at the Bronx Zoo to rear these animals through the most vulnerable life stages. So the zoo handles the egg through early juvenile life stage because they are better equipped to deal with that life stage. And then they're transferred to a TWT-owned facility here in central New York, where they spend upwards of a year or more here getting acclimated. And another part of this initiative is habitat enhancement because, it's not enough to just augment the population. You have to make sure that there's enough habitat there to support them because they are facing issues with sedimentation and destruction of riparian zones that degrades the habitat here. And so to date, we released 99 juveniles back in 2018. And I'll be telling you in a minute about the most recent cohort that we just released. But since 2016, we've also been putting in artificial huts made out of concrete, which help us collect eggs to keep this going. And we also place slab rock, which is what one of the pictures is showing. Now, as far as the work that we've accomplished this year, if you've been out in the field at all, you know that it's been a very wet summer, which makes it very hard to do our field work. This photo was taken a few days after that historic July 17th rainfall event where there was widespread flooding in the watershed. And the inset photo at the bottom left is one of our huts that unfortunately got broken during the flooding. We had 3 huts that were smashed like this, and many of them were shifted. So that required a lot of work afterwards to get them fixed up. So field work was essentially delayed through the whole month of July. But the good news is we were able to coordinate with our partners at the Bronx Zoo and transfer 124 juveniles from the zoo to the TWT facility. They were collected from the wild in 2017 as eggs from the recovery site. So these are a series of photos showing you the process of placing all the animals into coolers and transporting them in trucks and SUVs all the way from the Bronx up here to central New York. And this is showing you the process of once they get here, we have to then sort them into the 30 tanks that we have here at the New Berlin facility, which is also quite a job. Requires a lot of people. I had a lot of great help from Lake Coman College and James Gibbs from SUNY ESF. And then the next day we got to process all 124. And when I say process, I just mean that we swab, we pit tag them, and we weigh and measure them, and we photograph them. So we're able to establish a history for each individual and keep track of where that individual goes once they're released. So this is another all-day process that requires a team to accomplish. And again, I was really lucky to have lots of assistance. And the next step is the field prep, which, as I mentioned earlier, was delayed this year, but we were able to reinstall some equipment that we use to augment surveys that we do with handheld pit tag scanners. So we place these passive reader systems at the upstream and downstream extent of the release area, and they record every time a hellbender crosses over this big cable stretched across the stream bottom. So we know what direction the animals are going in and at what time. So we were able to do that. And finally, on August 28th, we released all 124 hellbenders into the release stream, where the 2018 group was previously released to. Bottom left photo is myself with Dr. Peter Patokis to the right of me and Dr. James Gibbs on the left. It's kind of like the core of our recovery initiative, and that's showing you the little boat with the coolers that we use to transport the hellbenders out to the huts where we release them. And as far as next steps go, we will do regular surveys of the release area with a pit tag scanner, which is the device I'm holding in the upper right corner. And we try to do this weekly as long as we can until the fall water levels rise too much and we just can't work the streams. We also have 2018 released hellbenders remaining at the site. About 20% of the cohort released that year is still at the site, and they are all looking fantastic, the ones that I've caught. So we like to do health assessments every year. And so we'll catch them as opportunity allows. And we have about a dozen wild adults that are present at the site that I also do health assessments on. And just earlier this week, we had exciting day in the field. We found 2 nests in our huts, and we were able to secure a permit from DEC to harvest a portion of those eggs and transfer them back to the Bronx Zoo so we can continue this process. So they will rear those animals through the early juvenile stage again, and hopefully in about 2 or 3 years, we'll have another cohort back in the Central New York lab here to keep bolstering this population and get more young animals into the population. So that has been the Hellbender season in a nutshell so far. And I always have to give a big thanks to all of our partners. This isn't something that we can do alone. So we have all these wonderful groups that help. And with that, I'm going to make a hard transition to sort of the other half of this presentation, which is broadly speaking, other wildlife. So at TWT, we're interested in keeping an inventory of all species on our properties, not just hellbenders. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a few of the species that we work with directly, and then some interesting observations from remote monitoring. And one species that I wanted to talk about before I move on to the trail camera material is the wood turtle. And wood turtles are not nearly as rare as hellbenders in New York State. You can see they're found pretty much throughout the state, except for Long Island, more concentrated down in the lower Hudson, but there are scattered records throughout the Upper Susquehanna Watershed. But we are interested in wood turtles because they're a species of special concern. So it's a similar vein to hellbenders in that they're a late maturing species that faces issues like habitat destruction and pollution and subsidized predators like raccoons and skunks, with all of the agriculture in this watershed. So we're interested in them from a conservation standpoint. And they're also, I think, a great species to think about if you're thinking about watersheds, because they're sort of equal parts aquatic and terrestrial. So they spend a lot of their time in the water, especially through fall through spring. And then other times of the year, they're utilizing these riparian corridors, these woodlands that are adjacent to these streams and rivers, and wet meadows and fields as well. So I think they're a species that sort of flies under the radar when we think about iconic watershed species. But here at TWT, we're especially interested in herps and hellbenders and turtles in particular. So this is one species that we like to keep tabs on all of our properties. And to that effect, one way you can do this is to simply look at the plastron, or the bottom portion of the shell. So no 2 plastrons are identical in these turtles. So that's a fairly non-invasive way you can distinguish individuals. So part of my job when I visit our properties is if I find a wood turtle, I document it, especially taking photographs of the plastron, and we try to build up a roster of how many turtles we have and approximately their age. And we note behaviors like breeding, which there's one photo there of a pair. And just this year, we found a 2-year-old juvenile wood turtle on one of our properties, which is in the upper left corner there, which is really exciting because it's really unusual to see wood turtles that young, unfortunately. And we also have other interesting observations like overwintering on some of our properties, which is the bottom left photo there. That is a wood turtle at the bottom of a stream, which is kind of how they overwinter. They don't go through a true hibernation, but they do lower their activity levels significantly. So this is just kind of one species that we're especially interested in on our properties, aside from hellbenders. But just shifting to general wildlife monitoring, as I said, we love to know not just whether these species are on our property, but like what other species are around. And we have over 1,000 acres of land just in the Upper Susquehanna River Watershed. So we love to keep these lists of species, but we definitely need trail cameras to help us out because our sites are spread all over the state. So I maintain this sort of rotating fleet of cameras that you use to help build up these species rosters. And to date, which should be about, I would say late 2019 is when I really started focusing on, when I joined TWT as a full-time employee and really started focusing on this. We have 63 species to date, just from the trail cameras, and 41 birds and 22 mammals. And that brings me to just 3 sort of case studies I would like to talk about, just things that I thought would be of interest to other biologists and the general public, just things that we've observed on some of our properties. So the first 2 case studies that I'm going to go through are from the same property. It's essentially our flagship property in the watershed. It's over 100 acres. It's part of our in lieu fee program. And this is the site where I've had cameras out the longest. So I have the most robust collection of photos and videos from this site, which is why I'm going to highlight it. And the first thing I wanted to just point out here is that we have this abandoned steel truss bridge over a major stream. I'm not sure when it was abandoned, but the bridge is about 75 feet long, so it spans a fairly substantial channel there. And it's turned out to be a magnet for species moving across this river valley. It's become a, seems to be a very well-used funnel for a lot of species. Unfortunately, I don't have time to show everything that we've gotten here, but we have things like flying squirrels. Now, is it a northern or southern flying squirrel? I don't know. We can't tell with this black and white infrared footage. We've had fishers come through, which was really surprising because they're normally associated with more heavily forested environs. But we think that this bridge is, again, sort of a conduit for animals looking to pass through the valley. And it's an otherwise very heavily agricultural area. We have other things like Cooper's hawks that like to perch on this bridge and hunt. We've seen many owls perch here as well. But kind of the star of the show here has been the bobcats by far, in my opinion. We had a female bobcat with 3 kittens heavily use this bridge, which you can see them. But there's a female bobcat. She originally had 3 kittens, and something happened to the 3rd kitten and it went down to 2 kittens. But this past winter, I was able to watch this family of bobcats at this site. So they cross over the bridge very regularly, even through the present. And they denned out back here at another location that I'm going to highlight. We had another location, another man-made structure that was abandoned on the property in the form of erosion control slabs along the riverbank. They're just concrete slabs that were piled along a bend to try to stabilize the bank, and the water had eroded spaces behind the slabs. And we found out that this was utilized by many different animals over the course of the year. We've also had other animals that came through, like mink, coyote, muskrat, beaver, and river otter. Well, this is turning out to be a fine collection of videos. But some of the cool behaviors that we observed at these erosion control slabs, which I believe you're seeing right now in the thumbnails here is, as I said, the 3 bobcats spent the winter there. So there's lots of grooming and playing. They're remarkably like house cats at times. And we had some short-tailed weasels that were utilizing the slabs. So that would be the second case study, is this these erosion control slabs that are on the property that have turned out to be a really interesting place to monitor. And if this thing decides that it wants to work, the third case study that I'm going to be sharing is a different location that we own along another waterway where there's a hairpin loop in the creek. And essentially there's this narrow spit of land that's, eventually the creek is going to erode it away and cut off this loop. But for now, we're finding that a lot of animals are using it as a shortcut, essentially. And so we've had bobcats, we've had coyotes, muskrat, beaver, deer, skunks, raccoons. The whole usual suspects go through this narrow spot of land along this other creek. And on top of that, the creek is also a latrine site for the otters, which, if you don't know, otters like to defecate in the same spot. And they usually do that as a way to mark territory and communicate with other otters in the area. And so if you can find these latrine spots, you're in for a treat, because you'll get a lot of repeat visits from otters. I'm gonna let that sort itself out for now. And I apologize to everybody, but what I was saying was, so the third case study with the shortcut through the hairpin loop in the creek. What I was going to show you, and what I might be able to show you still if this starts to respond again, is we're starting to get a lot of footage of otters coming ashore and leaving their marks. And we have a family group of 4 otters. It's usually a female with her offspring that form these family groups. We have these 4 individuals that have been coming around since at least March of this year. And they leave piles of scat, and they leave these grass clumps, and they like to rub themselves with grasses and leaves to leave their scent in the area. I'm just checking on this program. I think PowerPoint is seized up at the moment.
Michelle, maybe worst case scenario, we might be able to get those videos up on the Watershed Wednesday website. So what I'll do is I'll share the link with everyone so they have the website to know that that's where they can get information on past presentations. What we'll try to do is show you guys all these wonderful videos. I got to see a few of them before we started, and they're definitely worth the time. So we'll put up some of the videos of some of the wildlife so you guys can see them at the website. Just give us a couple of days to get it together, but that's our worst case scenario. So hopefully Michelle's computer is happy again. But until then, are there any questions so far while that's happening? We haven't seen anything come through the Q&A. So if there are any questions at all, since we are getting close to the 10 o'clock hour, please feel free.
Hey, Michelle, this is Lydia. I was wondering, how do you catch the salamanders?
Oh, the Hellbenders. Yeah. Well, the old-fashioned way was to just take a logging PV, which is like a cant hook, and lift the rocks, and one person lifts and the other sweeps their arm under the rock, and you grab the Hellbender and net it. So it can be tricky. It's nice when they're in our huts because we can unscrew the cap on top and just reach in there and kind of gently lift them out. But yeah, it's just hand capture, and they can be very hard to hold on to. And sometimes they're under these giant boulders and slabs that are just not liftable. So you've got to try another day for those situations.
I guess I can keep asking questions if no one else has them. What is your list of birds like? Is it mostly songbirds, or do you just like have the full gamut of raptors and everything else too? Pretty good distribution of them all?
Yeah, a lot of it was songbirds like you might expect, or like red-winged blackbirds, grackles, song sparrows, a couple warblers like common yellowthroat and American redstart. We had some grouse, turkey. Like I said, we had that Cooper's hawk, a couple screech owls, and we get some great horned owls every now and then. So it is a little biased towards songbirds, I would say. We definitely get a lot of robins and catbirds and song sparrows, like you might expect. But every now and then we get, a neat warbler or like a water thrush or a wood thrush for that matter too. So I would say the cameras are doing a pretty good job of picking up a range of sizes at least.
Do you count the birds that are just utilizing the corridor, like the eagles and the osprey, that may not necessarily land within your properties?
Yeah, we do count that on our lists. We do have, at this particular site that I was describing earlier, we do have 2 osprey platforms. We have not had any luck with nesting ospreys at this point. But I've been told that it can take several years before they, find the platform, so to speak, and begin using them. So PowerPoint might be working right now. So let me give it one more shot. And you can also please keep asking questions if you'd like.
Yeah, even if Michelle, you can move through some of the stills, even if we can't see the videos, if it's not
so
going
like
to behave all the way.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to push my luck. So you can see in these thumbnails that this is where that third case study with the loop cutoff in the creek, that's also an otter latrine. So you can see the group of 4 otters in the upper left that have been regularly coming around. And I've been really lucky in getting, like I said, if you find a latrine spot, you're in for repeated visits. So like, it's been just wonderful. They come through every couple of days and leave their calling cards, and then they're gone for another few days. If I can backtrack. So like, this is depicting the cutoff loop. So you can sort of visualize what I'm talking about. So there's a hairpin loop in the creek, and there's this narrow bar of land that a number of wildlife has figured out they can kind of use that as a bypass. And the more terrestrial species are just sort of funneled there onto that peninsula. So that's a great pinch point for really getting the most bang for our buck on this property as far as like deploying trail cameras. These are thumbnails. So going backwards, the second case study of the erosion control slabs. These are stills of the bobcats. Like I said, there's grooming behavior in the upper right. That's a clip of one of the kittens playing with a dead vole or mouse, just like a house cat would. And yeah, maybe it'll play, but so yeah, they just batted around and have a great time. This is a frozen pool in the river right by the erosion control slabs. but they're remarkably like house cats at times. So like these trail cameras have really afforded a cool look into sort of the social lives of these bobcats, even though they're mostly solitary for most of their life. The kittens will hang out with mom until the next litter comes along, typically. I think I pushed my luck there with that one.
Well, we're just
So it
about
goes.
at time. Yep. So thank you so much, Michelle. We'll figure out a way to show off more of your videos so people can see some of the great wildlife that you guys have come across. But thank you so much for a great presentation. Like I said, we'll show off some more bobcat kittens and otters and all kinds of things. Just to let everyone know, next week we've got more fantastic presentations planned for you. So come on out at 9:30 on Wednesday. And we thank you all for joining us today.